Someone will ask you a question, a greeting really. How are you doing? There are times when we almost reflexively answer in the following way, at least I do. Overwhelmed. And usually in my case, what I mean is I'm frazzled, disorganized, too busy, not getting the main things done that need to get done. You probably have felt that way many times in your life. But you've also probably experienced genuinely being overwhelmed, by which I mean those seasons or times in life when you just feel like the weight of life itself, all the things that you're dealing with are just really more than you can bear. You're not going to sort your way through it all unless there's help that comes from beyond yourself, right? The examples are common to us all, real life examples from this very community. Your business in which you have invested everything is sinking. Your household on the surface looks beautiful, but you're going underwater because of too much crushing debt. You may have a child who suffers some kind of an addiction, whatever age that may be, and it's not just that you are so fearful your child is drowning, but it feels like you're going to be drowning as well. There's a troubled marriage, and there's so much water under the bridge by now that it's almost impossible to even imagine some kind of a healing, some kind of a solution to the many problems there. There's an illness that you or a loved one has been dealing with for quite some time, and it's very, very serious. It's grave, and it seems that there is no treatment that is going to fix that. I'm thinking about some of our young people here, especially our students who are returning to school. You know what it is to feel overwhelmed with the pressures, the social pressures of fitting in, being popular, not to mention the massive amounts of schoolwork, extracurricular activities. Where are you going to get your sleep? Overwhelmed. Psalm 69 says it well. Save me, O God, for the waters have come up to my neck. I sink in deep mire where there is no foothold. I have come into deep waters, and the flood sweeps over me. And of course, as I read that very passage from Psalm 69, I can't help thinking of the victims of the fires in Maui just this past week. So one of the important lessons that Christians learn is that believing in Jesus does not save us from the events that can also seem to overwhelm us in life. And in this regard, we're just like everybody else. But the more important lesson that Christians learn is that in the midst of such events or seasons that feel overwhelming, there is a larger reality than the fears and the pains and the losses and the calamities of this life. And that larger reality is a person. This person has a name, and you know his name. His name is Jesus the Christ. Overwhelmed. The old English word there, whelm, it means to be engulfed or submerged. And I want us to kind of contemplate what I'm describing here this morning so far through the lens of our gospel text from Matthew. A very familiar story, a story that even our little children are familiar with. It is the story of Jesus' disciples being overwhelmed by the dangerous winds and waves generated by a fierce storm on the Sea of Galilee. Now, if you go to the Sea of Galilee, and many of you have, it's not hard to imagine this scene from Matthew chapter 14. This body of water is really a very large lake, sunk down in the landscape with mountainous terrain on the east side and on the west side of the lake. And in our reading today, Jesus has just performed one of his great signs, the feeding of the 5,000, that tradition locates on the western mountainous terrain of the lake. And immediately after this, Jesus sends his disciples across to the other side in a fishing boat, maybe Peter or Andrew's fishing boat, and he will retreat with the Father in a solitary prayer for a while, and then he will go and join them on the eastern side of the lake. When you're on the Sea of Galilee, on the lake, there's a noticeable gap on the western side of the lake in the mountains there, And it is the case that sometimes very powerful storms will blow in eastward off the Mediterranean over the coastal plain of modern-day Israel, and it'll get whipped through the valleys and then shoot out through this gap onto the lake. And if you're on the lake when this happens, the storm can come upon you suddenly with incredible ferocity. More than a few ancient fishing vessels found their way to the bottom of that lake because of these storms. And so when this very thing happens to the disciples in the boat, they understand their peril. They're in dangerous waters. But where's Jesus? Sometimes it seems that God is out of sight, hiding in the heavens when we are being overwhelmed here on earth. But is this actually so? And you know the story, right? The disciples in the boat, in the fourth watch of the night, see a figure walking on the water toward them. Could it be? And Peter yells out an odd thing at this point. If it's really you, Jesus, he doesn't say, come on and get in the boat. He says, command me to come to you on the water. And Jesus says, come. This is the essence of discipleship, right? Obeying Jesus, hearing Jesus say, come to me, and doing so regardless of impossible circumstances. We trust him enough to do it. And Peter jumps out of the boat and experiences a miracle himself. For a few moments, he walks on the water until it hits him. I'm not Jesus. What am I doing out here? So here's the lesson for today. When the reality of the storm seems larger than the reality of Jesus, it is only then that we begin to sink. Peter sinks. And so it is for us when the storms and the chaos and the troubles and the struggles of our lives, as very, very real that they are, comes to occupy an even greater reality than the reality of Jesus of Nazareth. And I need to remember this in my own life. You'd think I would know and not make this mistake again and again, to be more afraid of the events around me or the things happening to me than to be trusting in God and Jesus Christ. My own young adult conversion experience that I have shared with you at least a few times already in these initial years, and I'll probably share it a couple of times a year, happened just like this. Metaphorically, and in some ways literally, my little party boat got so far out in the lake, so far away from shore, that I had a kind of a wake-up experience in 1987, and I realized if there's any rescue for me in this little boat, in these waters, it's going to have to come from somebody else. And I remembered, Lord, save me. And he did. He also said, just get this boat to shore, by the way. So I want to say this too. The boat for the disciples in this story is also meant to be symbolic, not just of each one of us individually, but it's symbolic of the church, Traveling the waters of time across the centuries from the days of Jesus of Nazareth to the coming time when we will see him on the other shore. But in the meantime, we, the church, we, the disciples in the boat, try to navigate the vagaries, the storminess of this present age, remembering that Jesus is with us now, too, on the water and in the boat at the same time. And the fact that you may feel overwhelmed by stormy seas is not as big a fact as that Jesus has overcome already the stormy seas of this present age once and for all through his cross. And I think this is very important for us to keep before us here at St. John the Divine. I continue to be so incredibly grateful and excited to share in ministry with people like you all, to be in the process even now with our leaders in discerning what our vision is as we look to the future. to be more and more a place of vital Christian faithfulness, where more and more people are wanting to be a part of our life together, more baptisms, new people, more people who look like the rest of the city of Houston. And at the same time, we are going forth from this place to be a brighter light for the city of Houston, wherein every single one of us understands and is equipped to be a missionary when we walk off this campus in whatever realm of life we touch. That is very exciting. And I have great faith and boundless confidence in the capacity of this church to fulfill that vision, unless we come to regard the storms of this present age, cultural fragmentation, political polarization, social distemper and disunity, that they come to occupy a greater space here than Jesus himself. And I don't intend to let that happen. But I can't do that by myself. We need to commit to this together. Christians don't ignore the storm. We don't refuse to talk about the things that are big problems and divide us. But we keep our eye on Jesus in the midst of the storm, for only he can rescue us, and you know this. And for one important moment, Peter forgot. He got overwhelmed. He forgot. And it can happen to any of us, and it does happen to us. But I want to give Peter credit. When it happened, when he starts to go under the waves, he knows what to do. Lord, save me. That's our prayer. That's our prayer too, personally and corporately, and for our world. There's a kind of an ironic and painful blessing that is proven again and again in our lives and in the spiritual tradition of the church, I want to say, that it is sometimes precisely when we get to that place where we feel or experience being overwhelmed, when we come to the place where we realize if there's any rescue possible, I can't do it. Lord, come and save me. And we hear the voice of the Lord saying, here I am, it is I. So if you are feeling that you right now are in a season of being overwhelmed, I invite you to call out to Jesus. And if you want to learn or understand how you can do that, please let us know. I know my clergy brothers and sisters would love to have that conversation. We wish it were always smooth sailing once we said the Nicene Creed and we believed it, right? In closing, I just want to return to one of my favorite Christian figures in church history and one of my favorite stories about him, John Wesley, 18th century Anglican priest and regarded as the founder of Methodism. And I've talked about this story before, but Wesley was a very earnest, serious Christian who cared about the renewal of the church in England, especially in his early years. And in 1735, he discerned a call to go and be a missionary to the American colonies. And he went and spent some time in Georgia. Tried to do good work there, but perceived that he was a failure and decided to sail back to England. And on the ship back to England after that time, I think this was 1737, there was a terrible storm over the Atlantic. And Wesley, Christian though he was terrified by his own admission. He thought the ship was going to come apart, they were going to sink, and they were all going to die. Talk about feeling overwhelmed. But as it happened, on this very ship, on this very voyage, was a group of Christians from Central Europe, Moravians, and they were headed back to England as well. And while Wesley was terrified, he saw them singing together in a group, singing hymns of praise to the Lord in the midst of the storm. And he was deeply, deeply ashamed and embarrassed at his lack of faith. And that stuck with him. And when he got back to England, he wanted to know what was it about those people that they could sing in the midst of the storm. And he went to spend some time with them, and it was precisely in doing that that Wesley had his own sort of adult reconversion experience. It was hardly the end of his ministry when he was on that ship in the storm. So the ironic blessing for the church today, for those who are awake to discern that we indeed do live amidst great furies in this present moment, is to know that Jesus still reigns. Jesus is in the ship with us, on the boat, over the waters, and the call is for us to sing like Moravians. In a world today whose default seems to be to scream and divide and to hate and to condemn. The essence of the Christian faith is not escape from a sinking world. It is to witness to a sinking world that there is a Savior, that there is hope, that there is rescue, who has a name, Jesus Christ. After all, he is the one who has already sunk for our sake, sunk to the depths of the cross. And by his cross, we are given life, buoyancy, to rise above the depths, to witness to those who are sinking, and to glorify his name. Amen.